Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the I Just Want This Done Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Rayford Palmer, and with me, as always, the handsome Rahul Iyer. How are you?
Hey, Rafe. How are you? Likewise.
I am excellent. Today, we've got a great episode jam-packed with action. We've got our favorite celeb divorce stories. We like to keep you updated on what's going on with celeb divorces, famous people, wealthy people, and also extract lessons from those where we can that might be useful for you, because the celeb stuff's interesting, but what do we add to it? The dimension of being divorce lawyers, very experienced ones in the Chicago area. I've been doing this over 20 years. Rahul's been doing this well over 10, getting closer to 15, I think. And so we want to make sure that we help you understand things related to these that can apply to your situation. So we're talking about Chance the Rapper. We're going to talk also about Cardi B and Offset. We've got an interesting story from Peoria, Illinois about a divorce that ties into our core topic. We always talk about a core divorce subject. This one's going to be about division of debt and payment or division of tax liability also. Of course, we're Illinois divorce attorneys, so what we're talking about is from our experience as Illinois lawyers. Always consult with an experienced divorce attorney in your jurisdiction for advice about your specific situation. And this is not tax advice. If you need an attorney and you're not in the Chicago area, let us know. We can give you referral to folks across the United States and in Canada. Okay, so we're also talking, we got a couple of things to talk about additionally. Got a couple listener questions as always, and hopefully we'll have time for a fun tidbit about dating apps. We like to talk about dating trends, dating apps, and hopefully get to that today. So without any further ado, we're going to talk about Chance the Rapper. So Chance and Kristen Corley have officially called it quits. Oh, man. This story from Essence.com, recent. Friday, December 13th, she filed for divorce from the 31-year-old rapper. According to online court records, TMZ was first to report the filing. So the divorce filing comes 8 months after the couple revealed in a joint statement that they split. So they've been estranged for a while. So they said back then in April, they decided to part ways. So eventually she filed. They have two daughters, 9 and 5. The court finally didn't say if Corley was seeking child support. I guarantee she will be. The April statement said they plan to co-parent the young children. So good. They did the joint statement. And Rahul, we've talked about that before, right? Like coordinating things.
Absolutely. You want to have the messaging on point because otherwise the media is going to go in a frenzy and sort of run with it however they want, interpret everything in whichever way will sell most number of paper. Well, it used to be papers, but no more papers.
Right.
Most clicks on your clickbait ads or titles. So it's very important to have a joint statement, a unified statement.
Right. And so they're doing the right thing. Hopefully they're likely, as we've seen with these celeb and high net worth divorces or ultra high net worth folks, they typically mediate or work in collaborative in secret, work out their deal. The divorce case is rather quiet with the court, and then typically they'll file a divorce judgment and you really won't see much in the way of details. So we'll see if they play it that way or if it gets public. So the interesting thing is if the complaint or the petition for divorce doesn't ask for child support, they're probably negotiating that behind closed doors, and you can always amend a petition. So her lawyer could always file a petition to amend the divorce petition or a motion to amend, adding the child support claim if they ran into loggerheads and couldn't reach an agreement. So my guess is they're keeping as much on the down low as possible and keeping very few details or putting just the minimum amount of information in the divorce petition for privacy. So good on them. It sounds like a good strategy.
Just a very vanilla petition that doesn't disclose too many things, which is pretty typical unless it's a very emotionally charged case. It's very typical for these celebrity type divorces where they want to have this veil of secrecy.
Exactly. Interestingly enough, in September 2015, their daughter was born. They decided to part ways briefly in 2016. They weren't married. She filed a petition in Cook County, of all places, hey, hometown, to ask the rapper to pay child support, according to the Tribune. However, the Chicago Tribune. However, they reconciled in 2017 and they got married in 2019. So it's not a real long marriage. So that's the situation with Chance the Rapper. Interesting. We'll keep on top of it. We'll see if there's anything that comes out. My guess is it's going to be rather quiet until we find out they got divorced. So more than likely, Chance wanted prenup and he wanted a prenup. I'm guessing there is one, although there's no mention of one. A lot of times you'll see a mention of it in a petition, but again, they don't have to say it in the initial petition. It could always be amended later. So I'm guessing negotiations are behind the scenes. So tell us about the Cardi B story, Rahul.
Sure, yeah. So this may be, at least at this point, a little bit more dramatic than the Chance the Rapper situation. So Cardi B, obviously, as people might not know, is an artist, a musical artist, is known for many of her songs, and is married to Offset, who is one of the Migos, the rap group. So Cardi B and Offset filed for divorce. I believe it was maybe August of this year, or July, late July, early August of 2024. They've been going back and forth. Most recently now, she demanded that he sign divorce papers, and they always feud on social media. So most recently, there is a social media feud going where they're both exchanging very expletive-laden jabs at each other. And her position is, if you want this done, you should sign the divorce papers. I'm not asking for child support. Just pay the expenses you're currently paying and pay for our newest daughter, which they have 3 kids. The youngest one is like 3 months old now. And his position is, I want to split custody if you want me to sign anything. So it looks like he's asking for shared custody or some form of shared parenting schedule. So that's where they are. They're at loggerheads here. This doesn't look like it's going to close out anytime soon. Notably, it doesn't appear that they have a prenup. So it's going to create a lot more, especially because Cardi B recently amassed a lot of wealth, and without a prenup, depending on the jurisdiction they're in, he might have some marital interest in that property as well. And I mean, obviously it's mutual, but I would suspect that her wealth may be commensurate with, if not substantially greater than his.
Right. It's interesting. I see in a previous story that was linked in that first one, this comes from, where's this, page 6? Okay.
Yes.
In a previous story from page 6, mentioned that Cardi's main priority was obtaining primary custody of the 2 children. And, this term primary, not clear. Reporters don't know the nuances about custody, and different states use different terms. So in our state, when somebody says primary, they really mean it's more of a more visitation than the other person thing. It's not decision-making rights. But if she wants what we would call sole custody or sole decision-making, and he wants joint or shared, that might be the sticking point. So interesting.
Yeah, very interesting stuff.
Okay, now we're going to talk about a local story. Peoria Journal-Star reporting about a divorce in Peoria. Peoria is in Western Illinois. Usually you don't see divorce cases in local press. And this one's kind of interesting because it gets into the intricacies of debt and alimony in a way that is sort of instructive. And that reporter in the story, it's not their fault. They didn't ask a lawyer about it. So they just reported the findings, like the judgment. And it looks tilted, but when you look at it from our perspective, it looks pretty understandable. So we'll get into this. This is kind of interesting. They first say months-long divorce trial. It says, who's at fault for hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt from unpaid taxes, luxury vehicles, and credit cards? And so the first phrase is at fault. And Rahul, why don't you talk a little bit about fault and finance in divorce briefly so people understand? This is, I guess, Illinois perspective, but this is going to be true. You're going to find in equitable division states and pretty much true in community property states too, in terms of fault related to how assets are divided.
So in Illinois, which is known to be what is called a no-fault state, sort of like many, many other states, and basically what that means is that the only ground for divorce in Illinois is something called irreconcilable differences, regardless of any abuse, neglect, infidelity, whatever the case might be. The only ground for divorce in Illinois is irreconcilable differences, also known as a no-fault divorce. The law is actually very clear that any fault-based reason or any sort of marital misconduct is not a factor in how a marital estate ought to be divided. It might play into custody, for example, depending on what the issue might be. Were you abusive? Is that going to translate to the kids? We don't know. That might maybe have some relevance, but in property division, absolutely not.
Yeah, and your mileage may vary in other states, folks. Fault does come into play in other states. We're aware of that. I'm not going to go through and list them, but that's why you got to check with an experienced divorce lawyer in your jurisdiction, because some states fault is a big deal, a very big deal. In our state, it hasn't been in a long, long time.
And we talked about a few episodes ago, tortious interference with like a relationship. So there are things like that are in play. So definitely don't listen to this and think this is applicable everywhere. We're talking very specifically about Illinois.
We're going to trace some lines here that the principles apply in other places too. And some of this stuff's real interesting. And the reporter doesn't know what they're seeing when they read this. So they're just reporting it. And I think the reporter might have been a little surprised about how this came out. But when we look at it, we're not. And so we'll explain why. And it's interesting. So also in our division of assets and debt in our law, one of the factors the court can consider is wrongdoing of a spouse spouse, like if somebody's wasting dollars, they can look at which spouse contributed to assets. So who brought in more of the money. They tend not to do that very often. And they can also look at who spent more of the money. Typically, we don't see that very much. If somebody's wasting marital assets for a non-marital purpose after the marriage has broken down, that's what's called dissipation of marital assets, what is also known as waste of marital assets, maybe in other states. We're not talking about dissipation. That's like spending money on a girlfriend or something after the marriage broke down. This is basically, the court found after a months-long trial, and just a footnote, in divorce trials, they can go for months, but they're only in dribs and drabs. They're like an afternoon at a time, and it could be one a month. And so when they say months long, people might act surprised. That's not unusual in divorce trials because of the way divorce judges handle their trials. They don't do them Monday to Friday, or they don't have a jury sitting there. So they don't have to hurry up and get them done. So they fit them in their schedule, which can chop them up into pieces. I've been lobbying with judges to try to do continuous trials or contiguous trials forever. But so far, it's just my voice, I guess. Nobody's listening. If you're listening out there, Your Honor, or Your Honors, plural, please consider it. Thank you. Okay. So these were a Peoria councilman in Peoria, Illinois. So there's some government involvement. They owed hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid taxes. They racked up a bunch of credit card debt. They both had luxury cars with large debt against them and a mortgage. So they were underwater by about $400,000, not including their mortgages. Not good. So the judge issued a ruling in the divorce and basically said there was plenty of blame to go around for the high living. And it looks like the wife kind of tried to pin this on the husband largely. She claimed she had some mental health issues. She also said he'd committed an act of domestic violence against her. And the court found some of that credible. And normally domestic violence isn't relevant in a divorce case. The court doesn't consider it relevant unless it involves children and is recent enough where the court's concerned that it impacts custody and visitation. That doesn't mean domestic violence isn't important. There may be criminal repercussions, civil repercussions outside of the divorce case, but an incident of domestic violence is not going to typically impact the financial side of the case whatsoever. But the wife got it into evidence trying to say it was affecting her emotionally and impacting her ability to earn an income. So she's making an alimony argument. So the interesting thing about that was the court ended up denying her alimony claim, but giving her a break in that the judge awarded, or I guess gave all of the debt except $4,000 to the husband, the ex-husband. So what we see happen here is what we call it's really an alimony buyout. So the judge kind of probably ballparked what he thought the alimony was worth and then figured if I give this guy the debt today, that's basically like giving the wife half of that's like relieving her or giving her the alimony would be a wash with this debt. So making him take on all the debt was equivalent. And we see things like that. Courts can get creative and do things like that if they find they're equitable. Judges have wide leeway in how they divide these things and work this out. So what I wanted to mention though, the teachable point here, well, there's some we'd already mentioned, but Rahul, like the one thing I think that's important to talk about is division of assets. Normally people say, well, isn't it assets and debt? Normally people say, well, 50-50, right? And one thing people don't realize is it doesn't always mean those things are divided in a perfect equal slice. Number one, judges can deviate off 50-50 and they can do 45, 55, whatever. Those are unusual circumstances. In this case, this was an unusual circumstance. The judge took the maintenance, denied the maintenance claim, but gave all the debt to the husband to balance and thought that was a cleaner resolution than having the guy pay maintenance, having the wife chase maintenance over time, and the ex-person getting divorced. Judges, and we do too, we prefer clean deal. When we settle a case, we like to make them as simple as possible so it's easier for people to live their lives afterwards. And ongoing obligations, like having to pay somebody for 5 years, whatever, maintenance over time, that's not as neat and tidy as having some deal where you wrap everything up and you make it where it's still fair. It matches the deal, but it's cleaner. Like this, giving the debt to one person in lieu of giving maintenance to the other person. It's much, much cleaner that way. But what I wanted to get at was the tax issue is kind of interesting because, Rahul, when we deal with taxes, how is it normally handled in a divorce case? Like, let's say unpaid taxes. We always have that stuff in the settlement agreements talking about how we deal with if the IRS comes back after the couple, right?
Right. So there's multiple ways you can do that. I mean, the parties during the marriage are still jointly and severally liable for the taxes if it's filed jointly. And so we can do it one of two ways. We say in the event there's an audit or some form of deficiency assessed by the IRS in the future, you can either contract for it in what is called the marital settlement agreement that any such deficiency or result of monies owed through an audit or what have you, and similarly any refund you might receive will just be blanket split 50-50. Another way you can do it is you can do it in conjunction with whose income or whose reporting caused that deficiency and assess that all to that one person. You can say that if it's a result of some person's improper reporting, then they should be liable for it. However, the IRS just wants their money, so they don't really care because you have a state court judgment and they're going to come after both of you.
Right. It's important for people to know that the state court can't tell the federal government what to do. We have a system with federal government and state government operating on two different levels, and the state court in a divorce judgment can't tell the IRS to do anything. So the IRS is going to go after both people, like you say. Now, there is such a thing as what's known as an innocent spouse exemption, where somebody can claim that they had no knowledge of what the spouse was doing and didn't know they were cheating on taxes, et cetera. Therefore, the IRS shouldn't come after them. However, when Rahul mentioned the two ways that taxes are handled in divorce cases, typically when I see somebody try to have the person who made more of the money pay for any tax liability, I always object. I demand that it be an equal division of tax liability in the future. Now, we're talking about taxes incurred during the marriage. After the marriage, it's not the same, but the IRS may audit you years after your divorce and come after you for a prior year. Well, my point in that situation is, let's assume an equal division of assets. So you get divorced, the assets are divided equally. 2 years later, the IRS comes after both of you and says, hey, you owe us a bunch of back taxes and interest and penalties. My point on that is the couple benefited from the underpayment of taxes. Since they shorted Uncle Sam, they had more money in their bank accounts.
They had more purchasing power.
Exactly. And they then split that money or those assets. They bought a car, jewelry, house, whatever. That remaining capital stayed in the marriage where they spent it on credit cards, whatever, and they divided equally. So my point on that typically 99% of the time is it should be even Steven or according to the division of assets. So if you assume a 45-55, then it should be 45-55 split of the unpaid taxes. And if people are filing joint tax returns, it's pretty hard to claim that somebody's truly an innocent spouse. And the IRS doesn't often give innocent spouse exemptions to people, except if it's like married filing separately where they literally didn't see the other tax return, things of that nature. I'm not a CPA or a tax lawyer, so I can't speak to that. But when you're signing a return and you can claim your spouse did all the drafting or they had an accountant do it and you don't know anything about it, you have a duty to know what your own finances are. The law sort of requires you to have knowledge about it. You're signing that it's true and accurate. So be warned that you're on the hook. If you don't know what's going on in your own marriage, in your finances, you should find out for your own good.
Probably shouldn't sign it.
Probably shouldn't sign it, yeah. And ask questions until you feel satisfied that you understand it, and maybe get your own accountant to go over it and the underlying information to make sure you're comfortable with it, because you could be stuck later with a liability you don't know about. So in any event, in most cases, people should be on the hook equally for any penalties, interest, and unpaid tax. You might be able to shift the penalties and interest onto the bad guy if you had some good claims, some evidence supporting it. But courts are going to be skeptical of that kind of stuff. The judges are not the police for the IRS. They're not going to report unpaid taxes to the government. If unpaid taxes come to light, judges aren't going to think very highly of the people that aren't paying their taxes. That's meta case stuff that I talk about in chapter 8 of my best-selling divorce book. I Just Want This Done, How Smart, Successful People Get Divorced Without Losing Their Kids' Money and Minds, on Amazon, Kindle, Audible, and where all great ebooks are sold. Chapter 8, I talk all about the meta case, the stuff around the case, like the judge thinking you're a jerk for not paying your taxes. Will he say anything about it? Probably not. But will he think maybe you're not believable, you're a bad guy? Yeah, probably. That's the nugget there about dividing debt. That's generally going to be divided equally. The unusual thing about the Peoria case was it wasn't. And the reporter thought that was significant, but didn't really connect the dots for people in the story. Link in the show notes, by the way, if you want to read the original story. It's behind a paywall, sorry. But that's the gist. So credit to Peoria Journal-Star for the report on an interesting court judgment. We are going to now go to listener questions. We like to do these. If you've got questions, you can always leave the questions with us by messaging us directly. You can leave comments to the video, or you can contact us directly on our firm's website if you have a question. Also, our Illinois Divorce Support Network, our private Facebook group. We answer questions there every day, and that's a good place to go too. So So, Rahul, I will ask the question for this first one. The question is, how can I instruct my attorney to file an order or petition for my soon-to-be ex to assume responsibility for attorney's fees, considering I've exhausted my reserve funds?
Okay, great question. Again, disclaimer, we've mentioned it before. We're talking to you from a framework of Illinois law. Your mileage may vary depending on the jurisdiction where you are or your case is located. In Illinois, an attorney can't really file an order, so really it would either be a motion or a petition. Courts typically enter orders ordering either payment or denying payment of attorney's fees. So you'd really want to ask your attorney to seek payment for either prospective attorney's fees, meaning attorney's fees you haven't incurred yet, or attorney's fees that are already incurred. And you could also do both. So this is done typically by motion. So how you can instruct your attorney, I mean, the how is pretty easy. You tell your attorney, I would like to ask my spouse or ex-spouse or whatever the situation might be there, I'd like to ask them to contribute to fees. Now, just because you ask does not mean that's an automatic, I'm getting attorney's fees. So that's a big key there. Maybe there's already been fees allocated. Maybe there was money in escrow that's been exhausted. I know the question did say that your reserve funds were exhausted. Attorney's fees typically come from the marital estate. So depending on how big the marital estate is, what else is left, a judge may, the parties' respective incomes, a judge may or may not order attorney's fees to be paid. And it's very, very fact specific. And there's no just rule of thumb that if you file, you shall receive. That's not how it works.
In fact, I usually tell potential clients in consultations, chances are you're not going to get your spouse to pay your attorney's fees. They're just going to come out of the marital estate. Can you explain the distinction between interim fees and our level playing field statute in Illinois and contribution to attorney's fees? Because I think these are confused all the time.
Sure, yeah. So interim attorney's fees are attorney's fees that typically parties ask for, or one party will ask the other for, to quote unquote, like you just said, level the playing field. That's a simplified way of saying that one of the considerations the court takes is to ensure that the more moneyed spouse cannot outlitigate the less moneyed spouse by keeping them away from the financial resources of the marriage. All the assets you acquired during the marriage is marital, typically with exceptions, but you can't have the person who controls the finances to have an advantage. So the court allows a mechanism whereby one party can ask that the other party make available resources so that they can pay for an attorney commensurate with the level that the other spouse has or has paid their attorney. So if one spouse has paid their attorney $10,000 and the other one's paid them $3,000, the other $3,000 spouse will go into court saying, my attorney wants to withdraw because we haven't paid them, and this guy's paid his attorney 10 grand. So then the court will say, okay, you know what, fork over $7,000, and that way you are now sort of on even grounds.
And there's two parts of that. One is you have to have no access to money, and the other person has to be controlling the funds and have money available. That's one part. And the other piece of it is when you get those advances on attorney's fees, you may feel like it's their money, but you're spending your own money, because 50 cents of every dollar, if you're dividing assets equally, is your money. So people need to understand legal fees are paid out of the marital pot. And even though your spouse is paying, let's say they pay $100,000 in fees and you pay 50, and you think, well, I should come out ahead. It doesn't work like that. You've basically both spent 75 on attorneys. So that's the mindset that people need to understand, is it's in for a penny, in for a pound with attorney's fees. It's coming off the top of the marital estate. And at the end, it is very rare to get a court to order your spouse to pay your attorney's fees, where, for example, in that case I just explained, where it was 100 on one side, 50 on the other, where you would get a situation where the remaining assets would be divided such that that's how it would turn out, meaning you wouldn't be on the hook for the 75. You'd be only on the hook for the 50. It doesn't work like that. So people need to understand, when they've got, either when they're paying a lot more for a lawyer and they think they're getting one over on their spouse, let's say that the other spouse is the one who has earned more of the money or something, or they think, oh, this is great, I'm spending them into oblivion. Well, you're spending yourself into oblivion. You are cutting your own throat proverbially with fees. So it's important to know that, like, excessive litigation is a very expensive way to try to get revenge, and usually not a good way to do it at all, because you're really hurting yourself. Yeah. So that's the interim fees versus a contribution for fees that you typically see at the end of a divorce case. Those are usually awarded for like really bad wrongdoing, or misbehavior on the part of one spouse in the case where they bring outrageous pleadings and baseless stuff, and the court sees this repeated pattern and practice of bad behavior. It's pretty extreme to see that and rare. So people should know you just rarely see contribution or where fees are actually paid by your spouse, not just that they're writing the check, because that money that's given to you is considered an advance against your share of the marital estate, typically. Okay, so the next question is, can my spouse remove me from his life insurance policy? We have one through his work and another external, either before or after a divorce. Both were obtained during the marriage, 35-year marriage.
Okay. Yeah, that's another great question. So before the divorce, so there's two ways to interpret this, right? As lawyers, we always think about the way the words are phrased. So before the divorce, meaning before anything is filed, you guys are just living together. Can he remove you from his life insurance? Yeah, you can do whatever he wants. There's nothing to say. So, but I'll presume this question means before the judgment for dissolution has been entered during the divorce versus before anything has been filed. So during the divorce, yes, they can remove you, but it's probably improper. And unless there's an order prohibiting them from doing something related to changing account designation, such other sort of maneuvering, every once in a while, you'll see people do things like this where they'll take them off of their cell phone plan or they'll remove them as an insurance beneficiary. Your attorney is going to have to do is go to court and ask that you be immediately reinstated, and also ask that they be further restrained from making any such moves like this, because it disrupts what is called the status quo, which was you were the beneficiary. God forbid he dies the next day because he gets hit by a car, then you're going to be left high and dry, and we don't know who's going to get that money. It'll be a big fight in probate. That's the recourse there. Now,
just wanted to add, one of the things that's interesting there is sometimes you'll get I call it the evil spouse handbook, sort of like the school of dirty tricks, right? And one of them is cutting off money, canceling the policy, changing beneficiaries, these jerky things people do. And like you said, you can run into court usually and get the judge to make them fix it. But one of the things that the bad person doesn't realize for health insurance is they think they're being real cute taking their spouse off the health insurance policy. The trouble is, if that person gets injured while they're still married, they're on the hook for that. That's a marital expense. So now you have an uninsured person who's racked up $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 hospital bill. The court's going to stick the husband or the spouse who cut off the other person with half of that bill.
Maybe even more if they find that was their intentional wrongdoing.
Yes. And that's one of the rare places where a court in Illinois might consider fault, and using the concept of equity, they're not actually punishing the wrongdoer. They're trying to be equitable and balance the fact that that person did it wrongfully and not unfairly penalize the person who was innocent. So word to the wise, don't cancel any policies. Don't change any of this stuff during a divorce case. By all means, don't cancel health insurance because somebody gets injured or a medical issue pops up and they're not covered. Now you've got a giant financial problem as a married couple. You haven't screwed them, you've screwed yourself. So that's something important to know, but that's great. What you were going to say something else about this.
Oh, yes. I was just going to add. So after the divorce, can they cancel it? Well, once your divorce is done, you'll have a document either called Judgment for Dissolution of Marriage or a Marital Settlement Agreement. And that'll really outline the terms of what sort of a life insurance policy you should have. Typically, if there's a maintenance obligation or a child support obligation, it'll be secured by life insurance. There may be other things that may be secured, but might also say they don't have to, in which case they could remove you as a beneficiary, assign whomever else they'd like to. So that's completely a prerogative. Now, life insurance could also be term life, whole life. So maybe partially part of that life insurance policy might be marital, which might be divided. So your specific facts and mileage may vary, but that's typically how this stuff works.
Well, that's great. Thank you. That's a great answer for people. And that's it for our listener questions. Okay, now coming back to a segment that we always enjoy is the dating trends, dating apps part of the show. We found some really interesting stuff. So Mashable, which I didn't know they're still around, but they're on Yahoo Life, which I didn't know Yahoo was still around. And there's a story here from December 14th. This is the only dating apps worth downloading in December 2024. And we report this for you as a public service because some of you folks are divorced and looking for romance, or maybe you're single and looking for romance, and maybe you're just listening to a couple guys talking about divorce because you like listening to us anyway. I don't know. But we like talking about dating apps and dating because both of us are very married and we just find this stuff interesting. So it's like a social experiment kind of thing. And my sons are dating and they tell me about this stuff. So they're in their 20s. Okay. Dating apps worth downloading. So this is from Mashable, editors and writers apparently review these products. And I didn't know this, but every month somebody at Mashable does this work and they figure out what the most downloadable dating apps are. Now, in this article, it says, no matter how you feel about dating apps, you can't deny many couples now owe their relationship to online dating. So it turns out 1 in 10 partnered adults met through a dating app. I bet it's more than that, and people just aren't admitting it. So for adults under 30 and members of LGBTQ plus community, I don't know where they get these stats. They say 20 to 24% found a partner on the apps. They talk about the dating apps being a lot. It's easy to feel overwhelmed. Oh, what we were saying before too was they actually report every month on the dating apps you should download. Well, I mean, I think if you kept following this, you'd have 50 dating apps on your phone, but it becomes a full-time job. So they talk about Match Group, and we've talked about Match Group before and how many companies they own. I don't think people realize it's a bunch of brands. So they actually own Tinder, Match, Archer, OkCupid, Hinge, Plenty of Fish, and The League, among others. The League was at high end when we talked about it, one of them.
Right.
And they continue to dominate the market. This is an app that Rahul and I've never heard of. It's called First Rounds on Me, FROME. A newer app gained popularity for its date invitation feature. Choose a drink, date, time, and venue, and the app will send a personalized invitation to your potential match. Once a date's confirmed, it's locked into your calendars. The in-app chat feature is activated 12 hours before the date. Okay. In the old days, this was called asking somebody out. In my day, because I'm a Gen Xer, this is just called call somebody and ask them if they want to go on a date.
You tell them where, when, what time, and it's assumed it's on you.
Now, I'm not that old, but I mean, this apparently it takes high tech to make this work. I guess the magical part is, these are people you haven't met before. You're meeting them on the app, so, but I just think it's funny how like what's old is new again, right? And then this is actually an interesting aside. So on Twitter, by the way, at Rayford Palmer is where you can find me on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. And, I was commenting, somebody was talking about dating, and I don't know, I can't remember the whole story, but the bottom line was, I said, well, you could always have a date at I think I said a cocktail bar, you could have a drink or something. And I don't remember what the context was exactly. It doesn't matter. Somebody replied and said, that's not appropriate for a first date.
What?
Well, if you're 50 years old, it is. I mean, come on. I get coffee or whatever when you're in college, but if you're 35 years old, maybe somebody wants to have a drink and you meet them at a cool speakeasy somewhere. I don't think that's a crazy idea for a first date. Maybe you meet them at 5 or 6 at night instead of late at night. Do you think that's weird?
I don't know what's weird anymore. I mean, for me, going to a wine bar, cocktail bar, something like that seems normal. I wouldn't know where else to go. What else are you supposed to do? Coffee? I mean, I don't know.
Unless they're in dry January or they tell you they were a recovering alcoholic, and I'm not kidding about that, but if they're not a drinker, sure. But I don't think there's anything wrong with buying somebody a cocktail, having a couple appetizers, and talking to them.
Exactly. And I guess that's the hot new take. I was thinking, the thing that this app, and this is free advice for the app, you could take it if you want, is what the app should do is actually make the reservation at that location if it doesn't already do that, which would then be the value add there. So it picks the time slot, it picks the restaurant or the cocktail lounge or whatever the case might be, locks you in. Then you don't have to do an extra step, which I think could be a cool value add. But otherwise, it's like, I mean, pretty soon these apps are going to start writing messages to each other. So now you're basically just two apps are talking to each other, and it takes the human element out of it.
The thing we mentioned before about these that's challenging is they're so visual. And we talked about how like the majority of women on the apps select like 10% of the men and stuff. It's because women normally would look for lots of other signals about a man. And guys are terrible at writing their profiles. They have a picture of holding a fish or wearing a Star Wars helmet or whatever. And the woman just says, no, they miss an opportunity to meet a guy that might be a good fit because the guy doesn't describe any of his other qualities and the person can't hear him talk. They don't know if he's successful or smart or anything. They just see a picture, and maybe it's a lot of people put really bad pictures out there. And women look for lots of other signals normally when they meet somebody, and they're forced to be visual. And so it's, I think, limiting people in meeting people that might be a good fit for them otherwise. So, but I don't know that they're fixing that with these apps. And then we talk about the fact that people get left on read, and these people take advantage of the fact that people are interested in them and chat to 30 people and don't intend to meet anybody. And it wastes a bunch of people's time. So that one app said they were fixing that by only allowing you to have like 8 chats open.
I was going to say, so quick things for those listeners who, now it's a full circle moment, who like this kind of stuff, go back and listen to our episode with the millionaire date doctor, Michael Banovac, where he really talks about how all this stuff works and how to prepare yourself to look presentable for the social media, dating scene, et cetera, et cetera. So You can go check that out and also check him out on social media.
It's a really cool show. It's one of our few interview shows. Mike Banovik's really cool. The Millionaire Date Doctor. Really great episode.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing was a hotly debated internet topic a few weeks ago, and you just mentioned it. You said left on read. There's a huge debate. Is it left on read or left on read? And that was something that people were debating.
I missed that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So you said read. I always thought it was read. So
as in they read the message.
Yes.
And they don't reply.
Correct. But 50% of the internet thinks it's read. So no, that was interesting.
I didn't even know what the term really meant, except they weren't responding.
That's the takeaway, yeah.
Yeah, they read the message and they don't answer. And isn't the rule like if you send a message or like if you send two messages and they don't respond, don't send another one because then you look like you're hungry.
A crazy stalker. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. The other one was other apps like Pure, P-U-R-E, cater to people open to ethical, non-monogamous relationships or threesomes. Oh, there you go. That's now the cool name for swingers is ethical, non-monogamous, I guess, ENM. There's really something for everyone, including more traditional dating. They put traditional in italics in the story. Traditional dating apps like eHarmony, Facebook dating. I didn't know there was Facebook dating. I thought Facebook was just kind of Facebook.
Interesting. Yeah.
It says, think Tinder Lite for your grandma. That's what they say in the story. Christian Mingle, which swap endless scrolling for compatibility quizzes and faith-based connections. Okay, so basically they're recommending first rounds on me, I guess. And that's kind of interesting. But we were kind of dying to get to was Tinder has come up with what they call the year in swipe 2024. Was Spotify the first to do the year-end summation thing?
Spotify Wrapped. Yes, I believe so.
And so now everybody wants to get in on that. I've gotten like Gmail Wrapped where I find out I got like 3,000 messages from my bank. You know, I like I care about how many emails I sent. Our company that provides email service for our law firm sent us a wrap-up showing me how many emails the law firm sent in the year. Like, this is something that's useful to me. I was like, really? What, you know? So everybody wants to get in on this and they're trying to make press releases. Well, Tinder actually wrote a pretty funny thing. Their year in swipe is dating trends of 24 and what's ahead for 25. Now, I think it's like Pantone predicting the color for the next year. You know how they would like say lavender. They give it a cool name though. They call it like spicy purple, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's supposed to be the hot color for everybody this coming year. They determine this somehow. So Tinder's trying to do this with dating trends. I'm not sure how you predict a dating trend, but okay. So this comes out of LA and there's just some funny stuff in here we had to tell you about. So they've introduced the Year in Swipe Vision Board, which is an interactive tool for creating personalized mood boards. This is from their press release to recap their dating journey in 2024 and set intentions for the year ahead. Lovely. This press release came out December 3rd. So the mood board is available for those of you who want to jump on that right now. 20% of internationally surveyed singles reported they're creating vision boards to manifest their ideal relationships in 2025. Look, I'd recommend just getting out there and meeting people. It's like poker. You run more cards through your hand, you're going to get aces. Yeah. They could take that to the bank, ladies and gentlemen. I don't even play poker.
The tried and tested method, you know?
It's just a numbers game. Here's a quote from Tinder's chief marketing officer, who apparently is an expert in this stuff. But she says, singles are embracing intentionality in their dating lives, being upfront about what they want and refusing to settle. Nobody ever should have settled. The shift has driven 3 standout trends. Now, this is really great. By the way, when they say embracing intentionality, unless you're unintentional and you're all about like total randomness.
Yeah. Live in chaos.
Generally trying to be intentional.
Yeah.
You know, okay.
I woke up like this, you know, I kind of just strolled around and happened on some breakfast somewhere and just kind of just stumbled around.
I saw this guy and just said, hey, why don't you eat with me? That's an unintentional date. This is funny. So they say there's 3 standout trends. And why don't you pick this one up and talk about the trends? They're funny.
The 3 trends that shape 2024?
Oh yeah, they're right here, like loud looking, kismet,
yes,
and nano ships. This is great.
You know, the first one is singles are loud looking, leaving guessing games in brat summer, looking for anything but uncertainty.
We're not writing this, people.
I wish I could write this. I don't even know what half the words mean. So, you know, apparently last year was all about being the main character, living for the plot. This year, we're in the director's chair, taking charge of our dating journeys, knowing exactly what we want and saying it loud and clear. That's the new trend.
You should always say what you want, but okay. And apparently looking for, it says, was Tinder's top bio mention in 2024. So people are being upfront from the start. Okay.
So it's like, it's turned up the volume on dating possibilities, leaving no room for silent signals. Situationships, they're finally on their way out. So that's the first one. Some call it fate. we call it a kismet. Kismet, which is the word, it's the pun on, the play on words. And planned but unplanned is the vibe for 2025. A new relationship begins every 3 seconds on Tinder, setting the stage for those OMG, did we really just do that moments.
Oh, geez.
Sure, your meet cute might start online, but what happens next?
That's what I was going to say. This Kismet thing sounds like a flip side of meet cute.
Yes, exactly. So singles will move away from strict dating rules and dive into authentic, spontaneous connections. So you shouldn't sit there planning out every step like a chess game. You should just sort of go with the flow, I guess. Third one is no romantic connection is too small to define in the world of nanoships. And you're reclaiming romance in all its forms. There's two more, actually. There's fourth and fifth. Dating is a team sport, and then communication is queen. So instead of having a ton of people you're talking to once in a while, you should really have more meaningful connections to keep their energy and excitement for dating alive. I feel like if we just sat down and just like wrote down things that are common sense, I think we would have a really good manifesto on our hands.
Yeah, exactly. So what's funny is what I kind of like about this was, or thought it was interesting, we were supposed to be intentional, but then we're supposed to be having randomness. The magic of the unplanned is number 2. Dating being intentional is number 1. So I'm not sure how that works. And then the one term that caught my eye under number 5, communication is queen, is this is the press release. It's no wonder 45% of singles are seeking a golden retriever type, which is in quotes, in 2025. Someone loyal, friendly, energetic, and brimming with optimism. Okay, well, good luck, golden retrievers.
Yeah, that sounds great. That same one is also saying that singles are really prioritizing the following: trustworthiness, physical attraction, shared values, emotional availability, and shared interests.
Sounds like that's kind of like all of it.
Yeah. Meanwhile, deal breakers are, of course, bad hygiene, rudeness, and too much talk about an ex. And those are all major icks. Again, I'm surprised people didn't think of these things in 2024, and now they should do this in 2025.
I agree with you. And just dating tip, folks, never talk about the ex. Okay. And then they have the fastest growing emojis on Tinder in 2024. And I won't bore you with that because it's visual, but apparently the number 1 thing was the little red bow thing. And it says, young singles leaned into the playful charm with a touch of mystery of being coquette, if you even care. Most common first names on Tinder in 2024. Now, I would imagine that's just because people of this age group have, I don't know. But anyway, for men, I'll just do the top 3, Alex, Daniel, and David. So there's a lot of Alexes out there, I guess. And women, it's Maria, Laura, and Anna. ANNA are the top 3.
Your traditional names.
Right. And then most attractive users, star signs. Most attractive user, I'm not sure how Tinder figures that out. There's star signs in 2024 to men, Gemini. Attractive to women, Virgo is number 1. I'm not sure how they get all this data. It must be from the app usage.
You know what I would thought would be one of those things? It's like most ghosted first names.
That would be useful.
That would be something interesting. Has Alex been ghosted? Yeah.
If your name is the one that gets ghosted the most, you better change your name. The fastest growing interest in 2024, number 1, gaming. Now, I'm not sure if that means casino or video games. Number 2, spa. I don't know how that's an interest, but okay. Number 4, surprisingly, heavy metal. What's old is new again.
Heavy metal's making a comeback, I guess.
Top majors, number 1, computer science. Find that hard to believe for Tinder.
Yeah, right.
What do I know? U.S. Tinder trends. This is great. Fastest growing bio mentions. So things people say in their bio. Pickleball is up 148%, which I didn't know people on Tinder were talking about how they play pickleball. And then the number 2 one is freak, up 118%. I'm not sure how you mentioned that in your bio, like I am a freak. Okay, great. Congratulations. Top films, number 1, Joker. Number 2, Wicked. Kind of interesting. Top communication styles, number 1, better in person. Yeah, generally it's always better in person.
Again, it's like a full circle, the old way. You do it in person, you ask people out, you go somewhere, you set up a date. Yeah. It's funny how those things used to work, right?
Still does.
Yeah, exactly.
Top Spotify artist, number 1, Kendrick Lamar coming in number 1. This was great though. So they collected a lot of this data from surveys they've conducted and in the data from their own app when they anonymize it. So it's just interesting. So anyway, that's wanted to mention some stuff before we wrap up. This show is presented by STG Divorce Law, our law firm in Chicago and in the suburbs. We serve Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. We've been around for over 30 years, and Rahul and I are partners in the law firm. And we invite you to check out more episodes of our podcast, the I Just Want This Done Divorce podcast. Check out my book, I Just Want This Done, How Smart, Successful People Get Divorced Without Losing Their Kids, Money, and Minds, available on Amazon. Very easy to find. IJustWantThisDone.com is the book website. I'm easy to find on social media at Rayford Palmer. The law firm's website is stglawfirm.com, or you can just Google STG Divorce. You'll find us all over the internet. We have a lot of free videos, educational videos on YouTube. I have a huge grid on Instagram and TikTok with endless amounts of educational videos where we answer followers' questions. Also, our Illinois Divorce Support Network, our private Facebook group, is free to join, and we answer folks' questions there. We have 1,400 members or so and growing. And we do a free webinar every 2 weeks on divorce. And there's sign up information that's easy to get to also to sign up for that. And finally, we do a pro bono day quarterly where we do half-hour consultations with folks for free for Illinois divorce. So we have all these resources for you, not just the podcast. And we're happy to do this. So we'll be back with another episode in a week. And thank you very much for listening, folks. So Rahul, tell the folks where they can find you online too.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Chicago Divorce. Yeah, I mean, our other resources might not be quite as entertaining as the podcast is, but definitely do check it all out.
Yeah. And if you ever have questions, you need to consult with us about a divorce or post-nup, prenup, or something about modifying a divorce decree, and you're in the Chicagoland area, please check us out at stglawfirm.com, and you can click on the new clients button and reach out to us, and our team will call you right back and schedule for a consultation. Thanks very much, folks. Appreciate you listening and watching. Have a great day.